on the agenda to, if you could follow through on the items here, although public business is where we will have items to address.
Members, today is a short sitting. We'll go through very quickly statement by ministers, announcements, bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the House, motion for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained, public business. House Leader. House Leader, you would like to go ahead in keeping with the agenda? In that sequence?
That's right, Madam Speaker.
Thanks, House Leader. Minister of Finance and Public Service. Minister may require a little podium there. Thanks. Public business, the agenda has the legislation first. Well, it really depends on the minister, but if she goes in keeping with the agenda, all the items under public business are bills being brought by the Minister of Finance and Public Service. So So the minister, if she goes in keeping with the agenda, if you would like, I can read it out. The first legislation is a continuation of the debate. No, well, that doesn't prevent her from speaking at some stage. She can choose to speak before. She can choose to speak. You said continuation. Yes, so she can close. Right. I'm fully aware. I was speaker last week when you, or week before when you elected to speak after, in which case minister would close. So I'm just saying in terms of the agenda, we have the agenda. She could choose to go first with the conclusion of the debate, and we will go with that first. But it would be good for her to say where she is beginning. And
thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, we will, Madam Speaker, at this time, we will continue the debate on the Public Procurement Amendment Act. And the opposition will speak at this time.
Thank you, Speaker. No?
Member, as all the items on the agenda were under the name of the minister, then we have all the agenda items listed. If the minister stands, she's not compelled to necessarily start with the continuation of the debate, because we allow that leverage, and she was on her feet. House Leader did not give a directive in terms of which item would go first, second, or third. No, at the time she had not. Okay. So Minister was on her feet. So if members, and for me, since that's the first item on the agenda, if we're just going by the agenda, then fine, it would be the continuation. Minister was on her feet, so I just want to ensure she was on her feet and her mic was on, that she's comfortable with going with the flow as subsequently indicated by House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm comfortable.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Just for good order. The member from St. Andrew Southeast.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a number of questions. No, for the Minister in relation to the proposed amendments to the Public Procurement Act. The repeal of Section 13 and 14 removes the sectorial committees that were there before. I'd like the Minister, if you could indicate the rationale for the movement of the sectorial committees and the particular limits that sector committees and the particular limits and the thresholds which will now apply. Secondly, it hasn't been decided yet? Okay. Secondly, the Act provides the minister with... No, I know, I put in it. With the discretion under certain circumstances to waive particular requirements in terms of the procurement of goods and services. And I would like you to elaborate on those circumstances and again, the limits that would apply, the limits that would allow a minister to intervene and waive. Under Part A on page 11, there are a number of goods and services that are now going to be exempt from procurement. There's a pretty long list: artistic coordination, consulting services. So, for example, would the procurement of services for something like the Grand Gala, which is done on an annual basis, would those services now be exempt from the traditional procurement rules? Medical services, legal services, consulting services.
Consulting services, why?
Right, so for example, consulting services can cover a wide range of different type of services. Again, I'd want to understand the thinking there because it can, what we want to improve efficiency, but we don't want abuse. And something which is as broad as consulting services is possibly subject to abuse. So if you could provide some background on the list of exempt services that are there, the rationale for those exemptions, which were not there hitherto, the removal of the sector committees, the limits that are now going to be, the new limits that are going to be in place that will be applicable where a minister can intervene and, in essence, I don't want to use the word circumvent, but avoid the normal procurement process. Those are some of the questions that I have, Minister. I know you have to.
Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thanks. Madam Speaker, I just want to, first of all, say I appreciate the decision made last week not to rush through this particular bill on the day it was the debate commenced, but to allow some time, a week in this instance, for members on both sides who may wish to prepare to do so. I think that is the best practice. That is what the standing orders contemplate as the norm. And I think it is always to be maintained unless there is some serious exigency that requires it to be departed from. Madam Speaker, the Public Procurement Act was enacted under the last People's National Party administration and represented a fundamental overhaul of the procurement system in the public sector in Jamaica. And it has been subject to some adjustments over time, which is not surprising given how complete a departure it was from what existed before. And of course, regulations have also been made pursuant to the Act in an attempt to put into implementation some of the potential innovations that the Act contemplated. The extent to which those innovations are in fact having an impact is unknown to us. I don't know if the Minister has data on that, but the idea of using procurement to encourage economic development through giving more vulnerable, less well-endowed economic actors an opportunity to do business with the government and to grow their business and expand through the significant procurement power that the state has was one of the positive aspects of this legislation. And it would be good to know to what extent it is actually having that effect. Minister, there are a few questions I have on the bill which I would appreciate being answered, whether today or if you want to close it on another occasion, that would be, of course, your call. But I begin with the new Section 5, or the amendments to Section 5, which is the definition section. This is in Clause 2 of the bill. And it relates to the definition initially of open national competition. And it says that open national competition means a procurement opportunity advertised in Jamaica only. So the hook used by the definition as to, that determines whether or not something is open national competition is where the advertising of the procurement opportunity takes place. Now, in the world we live in, where virtually everything is on the internet, the fact that something is exclusively advertised here does not necessarily mean that the persons who respond to that and who seek to take up that opportunity are in fact lawfully doing business in Jamaica. And so if the intent of this concept of open national competition is to have that part of the procurement process open to Jamaican actors or firms that have established a place of business here and are lawfully transacting business here, hooking that on where the opportunity is advertised is not an efficacious way of achieving that objective. So I just wanted you to respond to that, Minister, to explain what is the policy, underlying policy directive behind that definition, and explain if, whether or not the way in which it has been couched achieves that policy objective. Similarly, or relatedly, the definition of open international competition makes no reference to the fact that the opportunity may have to be advertised internationally, for example. It doesn't relate to the definition of open national competition. It's not structured in the same kind of way. It simply says means a procurement opportunity for participation by any supplier. So it surprised me because I thought that if you're juxtaposing open international competition with open national competition, the definitions would relate to each other in a coherent way, whereas one of them speaks to being advertised locally, and the other doesn't use the concept of advertising at all in it, but simply says it's an opportunity for participation by any supplier. And it really makes me wonder whether the open national competition definition is really adequate for the policy purpose that underlies that concept. I move to another definition, and this is a definition of restricted competition. And I'll read it in tandem with what is now going to be Section 22A, big A, of the new Part 3 of the Act. And that new Part 3 is introduced by Clause 9 of this bill, which is on page 4. And one notes that in subsection 1 of the new 22A section, it lists 6 different methods of conducting procurement: open bidding, restricted bidding, single source procurement, request for proposals without negotiation, request for proposals with consecutive negotiations, or request for quotations. So there's some specific methodologies that are listed in that. When you go back and look at the definition of restricted competition, it says restricted competition means a procurement opportunity that is limited to a single source procurement or to participation by 2 or more selected suppliers. Now, neither of those two concepts used in the definition of restricted competition are mentioned in that list of procurement methodologies in 22A subsection 1. Yes, sorry, participation, yes, exactly, you're correct. But they don't, it doesn't encapsulate any others of the list there. And because the word, you have restricted bidding in B, but that is not included in the definition of restricted competition, it's a bit confusing as to how the concept of restricted competition relates to the list in 22A1. I would have thought that the definition of restricted competition would at least be clear as to which of those methodologies listed in 22A1 fall within that rubric. And one would have thought, for example, that restricted bidding would be one example of that, but it isn't mentioned in the definition at all. And I'm just pointing this out because this legislation has to be used by economic actors, and it's important that it be clear to users, you know, and it's a somewhat, I would say, technical piece of legislation. It is a procurement in the public sector is a bit of a specialized field. And so things that may be obvious to persons who practice their careers exclusively or mainly in that field are not necessarily clear to users who don't spend their life in that domain. So it's quite important that the legislation be coherent and that the definitions and the substantive provisions work well together so that it's easy to follow what is intended. I move on to clause 10 of the bill, and this is a new section 23 that is replacing the existing section 23. And subsection 1 has a general rule in it. It says, except as otherwise provided for in sections 24 and 25, a procuring entity shall conduct procurement by means of open competition. Now, open competition is not a defined term, as far as I know. Maybe I don't know if it's defined in the Principal Act, but it's not defined in the bill before us. And it seems to me that given that that's a general rule, there ought to be an explanation of what that means, especially since there's so many other terms of art being used in the legislation around different approaches to procurement. And I felt that that was something which ought to be considered. I move to clause 13 of the bill, and this is to do with framework agreements and so-called call-off contracts that are, as I understand it, procurement exercises that are done pursuant to a general agreement that governs all of those. So you have a framework agreement in place. It may be, let us say, for example, it could be in relation to clause 30 on page 8. So you might have a framework agreement governing, let us say, procurement of computer equipment for the government. And then you would have these call-off contracts, which would be from time to time, as a particular MDNA may need to buy something, that it will be done pursuant to the framework agreement, and presumably in a more simple fashion, because the governing framework is set out in the master agreement that we call a framework agreement. So these call-out contracts would be simple contracts that just incorporate, perhaps by reference, the detailed provisions that would be in the framework agreement. Subsection 3 of this it's actually 25F is a provision in the Act, but clause 13 is the one amending it. subsection 3 says the procurement contract approval limit for call-off contracts in the framework agreement is the aggregate estimated value of anticipated call-off contracts projected to be awarded under the framework agreement. So when you are intending to engage in procurement under this framework agreement mechanism, you have to make, the procuring entity has to make a projection of the aggregate estimated value of anticipated call-off contracts to be awarded during the term of the agreement. And that can be over a period of years. I can't remember how many years it's permitted to run for. But what my question really was, what happens if prices move in that period? Should there not be some mechanism for inflation-related adjustments? Because if you're capped at an aggregate, which is set at the beginning of the life of the framework agreement, you could find that due to whatever international or local events that weren't contemplated, prices move, and then it kind of throws out your whole procurement arrangement, because you hit the limit, whether the volume of what you are buying hasn't been yet achieved, for example. So I thought it might have been useful to build in the idea that the aggregate should be inflation indexed, so that it's self-adjusting for the life of the framework agreement. It was a thought that occurred to me. If I was drafting it, I would put that in, put it that way, in a commercial agreement. The next question I have for you, Minister, relates to clause 21, which is repealing the first schedule to the Act and substituting a new first schedule. Now, as the member for Southeast St. Andrew has indicated, the list in the new first schedule is very extensive, and I have some questions on the specifics of that list. But before I get to that, my question for you is this. Is this list in the new first schedule that's part of this bill, is it identical in content to the existing first schedule that exists today? Or are there items which have been omitted, which used to be subject to this exemption, or new items that have been added that were not previously exempt from the provisions of Parts 3 and 5 of the Act? So this is important because the extent to which anything appears on this list means that the procurement rules applicable to it are much more limited, and therefore, much more amenable, potentially, to things that we don't want to happen. So it's important, and it's such an extensive list, as the member who spoke before me said. I mean, for example, consultancy services, is that the word they use? That is a huge and very uncertain domain. You can consult on anything. So, I mean, it is, you can be a consultant on sea turtles. You can be a consultant on artificial intelligence. You can be a consultant on football gear. You can be a consultant on virtually anything. So for that to be in a list of exemptions seems to me to create a big loophole in the procurement system. I had a more specific question. Item X on this list, which is on page 12, mentions national level financial transactions. And I was just wondering if you could confirm what a national level financial transaction is. Is a national level financial transaction intended to be a transaction to raise finance in the domestic market? Is that what it means? Or is a national level financial transaction a financial transaction that's being entered into by Jamaica as a nation state? That, I think, there are two possible different interpretations of what that means. It's not a term of art, and I think it needs to be clarified what is intended by it. Because if it means a transaction involving the domestic financial markets, the capital markets in Jamaica, that's one thing. Or the definition could either be, or the term national financial transaction could either be focusing on the domain where the transaction is being executed, or it could focus on the party that is doing the transaction, who is executing the procurement, as being a national level actor, i.e. the government of Jamaica. It wasn't clear to me what this meant, and I thought it'd be useful for that to be explained. And the other point I wanted to make is that we have here that procurements during a period of public emergency are exempted, you know, and given the regularity with which we have states of emergency being declared in Jamaica over the last several years, you know, it seems to me that this really opens a potential for abuse in the procurement by the Minister of National Security of services. The services, portaloos, their food, portaloos, etc. This is a big gap that that really there ought to be no, in the way in which you have been using states of emergency, there's absolutely no reason to exempt procurement from the procurement rules for that. None. Yeah, none whatsoever. None whatsoever, because these states of emergency come and go, and you hardly notice them nowadays, other than the fact that they are announced. But in terms of their operational impact, you drive through the areas concerned, you don't see any difference whatsoever as to, you know, what is going on. So it seems to me that this is a peculiar exemption, given the way in which they are being used. But, Madam Speaker, those are my questions and comments on this bill. I would be grateful for substantive responses, well-considered and well-informed responses to the questions raised. And I thank you for the opportunity to have made my presentation today. Thank you.
Thanks, Opposition Leader. Minister?
Can I get the, can I get that?
It's earlier than you think.
It's coming, Minister.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The member from St. Andrew, Northeast, right? Northeast. Southeast, sorry, Southeast. My neighbor. Asked, I think his first question was about the particular limits, and to say that those limits have not been decided on yet. But when they do, as you will note in the Act, we will come to Parliament. Well, the regulations will come as well. Right.
The order is subject to affirmative resolution.
Right. The member also said that the Act provides the minister with discretion to waive particular requirements with regards to goods and services. I don't where in the Act is that? If you could point that to me. So I don't know if the example that you're using is in, okay. The sector committees. Sector committees were created a long time ago when we had a different regime. That was before we were so well developed in terms of the Procurement Act and so on. At that time, the PPC, well, let me say the sectors were only established to assist the then NCC, all right? The PPC has come into force since then, and it has all the staff and technical resources to do the work that the sector committees used to do. So if you remember, when the PPC started, they would not have had the staff that they have now, and so they had to depend on technical expertise from across the ministries, the different ministries. Over the many years, the PPC now has permanent staff, and therefore it is felt that having a sector committee continuing to exist is just a duplication of what the technical people at the PPC are paid to do. And in the interest of efficiency in the procurement process, it was felt that the sector committee, again, is just a duplication and an entity whose time has come for it to be taken out of the procurement process.
I was referring 22.5 on page
22.5. Right. So those are the, right. Okay. All right. All right. The member also asked that he note that there are a number of goods and services that will be exempt. And the member from St. Andrews South asked about the definition of open national competition. Open national competition, member, means it will be open just to Jamaicans.
It would have to be. It would have to be.
Why? Why? And then,
No.
it's not where it's advertised. And similarly, open international competition means you would include persons from outside of Jamaica.
No, the definition has to be.
All right, you asked as well about framework agreement and call-off contracts. And yes, you are correct in terms of the framework agreement being a kind of a broad agreement for particular goods or service, and that the totality of the framework agreement would be approved, right? So if there is need for work to be done by a contractor, then you wouldn't have to go back and get prior approval. You wouldn't have to go back and get approval for, a particular, yeah. So that is there. Right, exactly. Okay. Tie in with what? But the list at 22A 1 that I mean, these are the different methods of procurement, right? That's there on 22A. All right, I'll come back to that one. I'll come back to that one. Okay. All right. Member, just an additional, the methods are done according to the levels of competition. So restricted competition would be restricted bidding, RFP with negotiation, RFP without negotiation. Okay. Okay. All right. The member also asked about repeal of the first schedule. We have open national competition. Right, so you would want that, right? What, open competition? But open competition would include those, would include open national competition and open international competition. All right, we'll make note of that. Right, okay, all right. And then the member asked about the first schedule, and well, I know for sure doing a procurement during emergency is added. I'm looking for the list. The issue of the debt, the national debt, do activities with the national debt, that was added. Yes, national level financial transaction. National level financial transactions. GOJ transactions. All right. Yes. Okay, we could. All right. So in the current act, you will note that there is also a Schedule 1 that is there with many of these same exemptions. Right, states of emergency.
It's emergency or extreme urgency.
Yeah, that's added. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so the new proposed exemptions are
Minister
the procurement.
and leader of the opposition, this is very unusual. Very, very unusual. No, this is most inappropriate. This constant interruption and back and forth is not the way that we would normally. Members, I do not need your assistance. Members. Minister, take a seat, please.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I rise on a point of order. The Minister, Madam Speaker.
Acting House Leader.
Thank you for your guidance, my Clarendon colleague. I think the member should be allowed to either conclude the debate or, if the leader of the opposition has additional questions, there's an appropriate approach by the standing orders that he can use to ask these questions. The off-mic interruptions of the presenter, though the points may be valid, it's not the appropriate mechanism. So with all due respect to the leader of the opposition, if we are governed by a standing order, my friend, we are governed by standing orders, not by your opinion. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, the leader of the opposition in his presentation did rightfully pose certain questions. Those questions were not sufficiently clarified, and hence the back and forth. It might be appropriate, Madam Speaker, as you have noted, that a pause because there has to be some changes that flow already from what the questions have elicited. There might have to be a pause to enable the draft people to do those amendments before we are able to terminate, before we are able to conclude this debate.
Leader of Opposition Business, with the utmost respect, that's a challenge I have. I have not identified even one amendment. I am not able to identify even one amendment in the discussion. So what happened? I am speaking. Opposition leader, I am speaking. I am on the floor. So when the discussion goes in the way it is going, where you have had the opportunity to outline the concerns, recommendations, suggestions, and questions, and then the minister is answering, and you are not on the mic, it is not recorded in Hansard, the public is not hearing anything that you have to say, it becomes a disjointed interruption between the minister and yourself, and it actually does not carry well. So, the minister can't just have a conversation with you alone. She has a duty to the members of parliament in here and the rest of the country. So, right, so nobody is hearing you, opposition leader, at all. Nobody hears you if you're not on the mic.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister, you may not want to speak until the House is quiet.
She's not begging no break. I said, come on, she's offended.
Anyway,
Okay, so member
members,
from St.
allow
Andrew
Minister
South,
to conclude her response.
just going to explain the difference. You were talking about the national versus international, open national. Those are levels of competition versus the list that we have that speaks to, in clause 9, the methods of competition. Okay.
When we get to committee stage, we'll do it.
All right, so we'll deal with it in committee stage. All right. And you had asked about what are the new amendments. The procurement of banknotes and coins for issue by the Bank of Jamaica, that is new. Yeah, that was
Minister,
added to the
if you
list.
continue to have a conversation with one individual who is not on the mic and is not making a presentation, then you also contribute to the disorder in the House. Minister, you're not speaking to one individual. You had a series of questions and discussion, and you are responding for the benefit of the entire Parliament and all of Jamaica.
Okay, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the new proposed amendments are the procurement of banknotes and coins for issue by the Bank of Jamaica, the implementation by the Bank of Jamaica of monetary policy and foreign exchange policy through financial contracts, financial advisory services procured from the International Finance Corporation in respect of road development projects in Jamaica, and technical cooperation and assistance for the provision of goods, works, and services pursuant to any agreement between the Government of Jamaica through the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority and the Government of the Republic of Singapore through the Singapore Cooperation Enterprise related to or connected with the implementation of the Jamaica Logistics Hub initiatives. Thank you. Those are, Madam Speaker, those are the new proposed exemptions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister, would you kindly consider whether you're electing to close the debate or whether you are going to continue?
So, Madam Speaker, I ask that we conclude the debate on the bill and then ask that it be read a second time.
The question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Public Procurement Act read a second time.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. The Speaker is now in committee as the chair and is allowing, as chairwoman, the unruly opposition leader to continue to speak off mic with the unruly Minister of Constitutional Affairs. Let's allow Minister to just open based on the discussions we had in the House. Kindly guide us as to how you would like to proceed, Minister.
Madam Chair, I just asked for a few minutes to consult with the technical people.
Do you need about 5 minutes, Minister? Do you want us to suspend for about 5 minutes? You're good? All right. Thank you. So, members of the committee, Minister is asking for 5 minutes. We will come back at 3:20. Members, I've asked the Minister for an update. She's asking for 10 minutes more, just to ensure she considers all the points raised in the discourse. Do you so agree? Okay. Thank you very much, members. Marshall, kindly advise that the time has been granted. now being 3:34, we will reconvene committee meeting. Once again, thanks to the members for being so gracious and facilitating the time to tidy up the legislation in the interest of the people. Minister?
Madam Speaker, I ask that you go through the bill by putting clause 1.
So I put clause 1 of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister, don't turn your mic off.
Okay. Madam Speaker, I ask that you put clause 2 and that we do have 2 amendments in clause 2.
Please state what the amendments are, Minister.
Okay. Sorry. The first is the definition of open international competition. We want to delete and replace with the following: open competition, open international competition means a procurement opportunity for participation by any supplier that meets prescribed eligibility criteria. And for open national competition, we ask that you delete and replace with the following: open national competition means a procurement opportunity for participation by any supplier who is registered with the and is tax compliant in Jamaica at the bid submission deadline date.
I thank you, Minister. I put clause 2 as amended. Those in favor?
Aye. Okay. Madam Speaker.
Hold a moment, please, Minister.
Sure.
It's jealous, you're jealous? Perhaps. I think you are jealous today. The eligibility criteria set out in Regulation 17 and 18.
So, Minister, I'm going to put the amendment. I'll read it exactly as written by Legislative Council. So the first amendment that we will put for vote is originally written: open international competition means a procurement opportunity for participation by any supplier. The adjustment to that is it continues to read: who meets any prescribed eligibility criteria. Full stop. Full stop.
Yeah.
Meets any is what's here.
The technical.
Oh, well, semicolon is before who? And it had a semicolon before. There's an additional note from Ledge Council. So it says who meets any prescribed eligibility criteria.
That's right. That's the end,
take it from
Madam
two,
Speaker.
you know.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, the definition of open international competition is the following. Open international competition means a procurement opportunity for participation by any supplier that meets prescribed eligibility criteria.
If you're going to be that technical, yes. Semicolon. You have to put the amendment when you put the provision as amendment.
So members, I put the amendment that is in respect of open international competition as read by Minister. Yes. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
And then open national competition means...
Would you read the amendment again, Minister?
Yes.
Just so I can follow along and ensure it is written.
Open national competition means a procurement opportunity for participation by any supplier who is registered with the PPC and is tax compliant, Public Procurement Commission, and is tax
public. Yeah.
So much class now.
Okay. Madam Chairman, open national competition means a procurement opportunity for participation by any supplier that is registered with the Commission and is tax compliant in Jamaica at the bid submission deadline date. At the bid submission deadline.
At the time of the amendment, those against, the ayes have it. I now put clause 2 with 2 amendments as previously read and approved. Those in favor? Those against, the ayes have it. Minister, clause 3.
Yes, 1 to 8. Yes, please put clause 3 to clause 8.
I now put clauses 3 through to clause 8. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Madam Chair, in clause 9, I have 2 amendments. In 22B, A, and it should read, a value not exceeding the relevant competition threshold without the prior approval of the head of the procuring entity. Clause 9, that's what I said. Clause 9 22B, sub 2A. 2A. Right.
The only amendment there, Minister, is that it's inserting the word prior.
Right, but in between, well,
Between,
the
without
and
the
approval.
and
So it
approval.
should read a value not exceeding the relevant competition threshold without the prior approval of the head of the procuring entity. And similarly, in B, right, it should say, right.
So
insert
members,
prior.
in both cases, the amendment is really inserting the word prior in front of approval for clause 2A and 2B of clause 22B. Those in favor.
No, clause.
So it is,
Nine.
it is clause 9, section 22B, subsection 2A and 2B. And both amendments is inserting the word prior. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. We now put clause 9 as amended. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister, continue.
Okay, Madam Chair, if you could go from clause 10 to clause 20, 21, 22.
I now put clause 10 through to 21.
20,
Hold on a
22,
moment.
In clause 21, I wanted to suggest that.
Can we then put clause up to 20? then?
Yes, sure.
I now put clause 10 through to clause 20. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Member Brownberg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, for Part A, Section 1, subsection, what is that now?
It's paragraph 1.
Paragraph 1,
Subparagraph.
H.I. Travel services and hotel accommodation or facilities, as well as T. I was suggesting that they could be eliminated because I was wondering why it is that we would not want travel services and hotel accommodation or facilities or group life or group health insurance subjected to tendering.
Which one? Travel service?
What's the justification? Yeah. Why would the procurement of insurance, group life and group health not be subject to the full procurement?
That's in the existing.
Yeah.
No? The travel services and hotel accommodation or facilities, Madam Chair, is in the existing act. Okay, so within the schedule.
Yeah.
Oh, this is new.
And especially the financial services one? That's con.
While the minister waits, may I just ask a clarifying question with respect to...
Not yet. Allow the minister to focus on the clause, and then we go to the clarifying question, and we continue. Don't turn your mic off, member. Go ahead. Ooh. When you're not finished, don't turn your mic off next time, all right?
I'm holding, I have a clarification. Right. I too have a clarification, Madam Chair.
All right. Hold on, member.
Eh? I won't take advice from you today. Today. I know you're going to support me. You're going to support me. Eh? I'm humble. No, I can't trouble Angela. She's on my committee. I roll the dice.
Members, please. There were 2 points of clarification. Members, there are 2 points of clarification. Member Hilton, Member Montague. Member Hilton, proceed. 2 points of clarification, just in case it's on this clause before we move ahead.
Yes, thank
clarification.
You, Thank you, Chair. Minister.
So, Minister, just in case, so let me ask first. Minister is just concluding question asked by Member Brownberg within the context of Clause 21 that we were concluding. If your clarification question is at Clause 21, then proceed to ask your clarification question now,
Yes.
and then Minister will respond.
Yeah, Chair, thank you, Chair. Paragraph 1, subparagraph S.
Brownberg.
S. Just to clarify, while those arrangements as between cooperation agreements as between governments may be exempted, just want to clarify that they will nevertheless be published. Huh?
They will be,
No, just want to clarify that.
all right. Madam
Exemption.
Chair, Madam
Member
Chair,
Montague?
it's an exit.
Right.
Madam Chair, mine is at the memorandum and objectives. So
hold on that one.
That's why I'm
member.
holding.
All right, so turn your mic off and turn it on again. Minister, proceed.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify for the member, the issue on group life insurance or group health insurance. The group health and life are staff negotiated benefits, and employees participate in the process, and they also pay premiums. Since these are negotiated benefit, but it does not mean that because it's exempt that they will not be done competitively. That's existing.
Minister, from my understanding of this discourse, we are not making any amendment to 21. I will now put clause 21. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Minister, direct accordingly.
Please go ahead, Madam Speaker, and put clause
22.
Yes.
I put clause 22. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. I think Member Montague had a clarification on the title and enacting clause. But, memorandum it was. It's not a part of it, yes. All right, so. So, Minister, I put the title and enacting clause. No, you will get to ask a question, member. Just concluding the elements that I would need to conclude. So I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. So before we report the bill as having passed, we will take a clarification question from Member Montague on the memorandum. No, he's in committee, so that's why. He's in committee, so it is Member Montague here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you. The memorandum on objectives and reasons state to correct conceptual and fundamental deficiencies in the Act. In my view, one of those deficiencies were contractors who would bid on works that yet they have so much work they did not complete before, or the work was shoddy. And then we still award them more contract because they satisfied the needs. And this was always an issue. And going through the new amendments, I have not seen anywhere where that is corrected. And before it leaves committee, because I mean, you have some contractors who are serial contractors at this thing. So I want to be directed exactly where in the bill covers that section to correct that deficiency. I don't want to say I told you.
Madam Chair, just to respond to that there was developed some time ago the contractor and consultant performance evaluation program. It is the early days of that. The data is being collected from across ministries as to the performance of contractors and consultants. It is felt that we do not yet have, a filled-out database. We don't have all the information yet in order to be able to incorporate that in law. At the appropriate time, it will be so incorporated in law.
Thanks, Minister. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage with 4 amendments. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Members of the Marshal will... Members, we're back in the House. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage with 4 amendments. Minister.
Madam Speaker, I ask for the bill to be read a 3rd time.
Those in favor? The question is that the bill now be read a 3rd time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Public Procurement Act, read a 3rd time and pass.
Madam Speaker, to continue the business of the House on the public business, the Minister of Finance will open the debate. She'll commence the debate on the bill shortly entitled the Tax Administration Jamaica Amendment Act 2025, and it is the intention to close the debate today as well. Similarly, the debate to commence on the bill shortly entitled the Breton Woods Agreement Amendment Act 2025, and it is the intention of the Minister to open and close the debate at this time today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Minister, if you don't mind.
Madam Speaker, I stand here today to commence the debate on a bill entitled an act to amend the Tax Administration Jamaica Act. This bill allows the Minister of Finance and the Public Service to directly appoint the private sector members of the Board of Tax Administration Jamaica. Madam Speaker, by way of background, the Tax Administration Jamaica Act, the Principal Act, established the Tax Administration Jamaica, TAJ, as a statutory body with a governance structure that includes a board of the authority. The board, Madam Speaker, has the responsibility of overseeing the general administration of the TAJ, though importantly, it is not concerned in the administration and collection of domestic tax or the implementation of tax policy. Madam Speaker, the board is composed of 9 members, the Commissioner General as an ex officio member, 5 public officials, and 3 persons drawn from the private sector. The private sector members are appointed after consultation with an advisory committee constituted by the Minister as per paragraph 1 and subparagraphs 3 and 4 of the first schedule of the Principal Act. Madam Speaker, I imagine that the intent behind this provision was to, amongst other things, to include stakeholder participation in government, as the advisory committee is constituted of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, the Jamaica Manufacturers Association, and a representative of the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Notwithstanding the rationale behind this provision, Madam Speaker, the appointment mechanism for the 3 private sector members of the board has proven to be excessive, cumbersome, and inefficient. There will still be private sector representation, Madam Speaker. However, the Minister of Finance and the Public Service will make those appointments directly. Madam Speaker, this Honorable House is reminded of the prospective directors database established under the Nomination, Appointment, and Selection Regulations made pursuant to the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, where prospective directors are vetted and due diligence conducted as is appropriate. The bill is presented as only 2 clauses, Madam Speaker. Clause 1 of the bill states the short title and name of the bill, the Tax Administration Jamaica Amendment Act, and provides that it should be read and construed as one with the Tax Administration Jamaica Act. And Clause 2 of the bill deletes subparagraphs 3 and 4. Madam Speaker, the Memorandum of Objects and Reason summarizes the object of the bill as removing the requirement for the constitution of the advisory committee. Madam Speaker, that concludes my remarks for these amendments to this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. A member from St. Andrews Southeast.
Madam Speaker, we don't have an objection to what the Minister is proposing. My only question is, can you state whether all the public sector boards are being appointed consistent with the new regulations that were passed, where members have to be in a database, screened, and then subject to that vetting before they're appointed, if that is in effect now and all public sector boards are complying with that?
Minister, hold a moment. Are there any other contributions to the debate? No, I'm making sure that we follow proper procedure. Minister, in responding, you conclude the debate. You may go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, member, public entities are in compliance with the law as it relates to persons registering on the database, their competencies are matched, and that's a process that is underway. It is in effect, very much so. Yes.
I don't understand you all, you know. Another speaker, not this speaker. Yes.
It is in effect, Madam Speaker.
So, Minister.
And so, Madam Speaker.
The challenges and opposition leader, it has happened to me as well. When we respond on the mic or speak on the mic and the listening public does not know what the question was, it sometimes makes zero sense to the public, and very often they get it wrong. So it's not to be difficult, it is to follow the standing orders and the procedures. And if we continue, then I will highlight the standing order as it relates to interruptions. Minister, have you concluded the debate? No. I am at liberty. That is one of the few privileges of being the chair or the speaker. So, Minister, if you have concluded, yes, I would like to move
Madam Speaker,
to committee.
This concludes the debate on the bill. I ask that it be read a second time.
Thank you, Minister. Clark. Members, the question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Tax Administration Jamaica Act, read a second time.
Thank you. Marshall. Members, please allow me to remain here. We are going into committee. Minister, you have two clauses I just want to confirm. Would you like to put clause 1, 2? Are there any amendments from anyone? None. I put clauses 1 and 2. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendments. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. We're back in the House. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendments. Minister?
Okay, I'll go on to the next one. Madam Speaker, I ask that the bill be read a third time.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Tax Administration Jamaica Act, read a third time and pass.
Minister, you may proceed with the third and final bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand here today to table and commence the debate and pass a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Breton Woods Agreements Act. This bill seeks to allow for the exemption of locally recruited employees of the World Bank from the payment of income tax. Madam Speaker, by way of background, the Breton Woods Agreement Act, the Principal Act, incorporates into domestic law Jamaica's accession to the Articles of Agreement, which governs the operations of the International Multilateral Arrangement to establish the International Monetary Fund and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the World Bank, and related matters. Amongst the matters addressed by the Principal Act is the tax treatment of locally recruited staff of the bank. Though through subsequent arrangements by the Jamaican government to operationalize the World Bank in Jamaica, the tax treatment of Jamaican nationals employed to the bank became unclear through the signing of an establishment agreement in 1993 that created terms and conditions that conflicted with the Principal Act. Madam Speaker, the bill today seeks to bring clarification to this matter. The bill has only 2 clauses, Madam Speaker. Clause 1 of the bill states the short title and name of the bill, the Breton Woods Agreement Amendment Act, and addresses the preliminary issue that it should be read and construed as one with the Breton Woods Agreements Act. Clause 2A and B of the bill renumbers Section 5 of the Principal Act to include a new subsection 2 and 3, which provides respectively that no tax shall be levied on or in respect of salaries and emoluments paid by the banks to executives, directors, alternates, officials, or employees of the bank who are citizens of Jamaica, and that the tax exemption granted shall not apply to a person who is employed to the bank in a category that received hourly wages, or a person who is employed to the bank in the category of a consultant or contractor. The foregoing provisions for amendments of the Breton Woods Act, Madam Speaker, accords with the tax treatment outlined in the Establishment Agreement of 1993. Madam Speaker, the Memorandum of Objects and Reasons summarizes the object of the bill as seeking to provide the tax exemptions to all employees of the World Bank with few exceptions. Madam Speaker, I now conclude my remarks on the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The member from St. Andrew Southeast.
Madam Speaker, I'm just trying to understand the rationale for the bill. Is it that all international organizations that operate locally, which would include the IMF, the UN, other internet, IDB, etc., have similar provisions, and so as such there was an anomaly where these employees were subject to paying the taxes which their counterparts would not have been? And is that a general provision for locally employed staff in other countries where this organization operates? I just want to know for clarification.
You may now conclude. Minister, take your seat. Leader of the opposition.
Yeah, that's a quick one. And Minister, if you could just identify the differential treatment between hourly paid workers and other employees of the international organization, the World Bank in this instance. Is that the norm in these arrangements with international bodies that have a presence here? Specifically, I'm asking in relation to the differential treatment between hourly paid workers and other staff. That's what I'm asking about. Thank you.
Minister.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my understanding is that the employees of the bank are deemed to be self-employed for the purposes of administering the Income Tax Act and are required to file individual income tax forms. So that is the case. The law just clarifies because it was unclear as to how to proceed.
So, Minister, please move for conclusion and that the bill be read a second time.
Madam Speaker, I move to conclude the debate on the bill and ask that it be read a second time.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Breton Woods Agreements Act to exempt locally recruited employees of the World Bank from the payment of income tax, read a second time.
Again. All right, committee stage. Are there any amendments? None. I put clause 1 And clause 2, those in favor? Oh, sorry, my apologies.
I'm a little perplexed by the answer that was given by the minister. The Act says that no tax shall be levied on these persons' salary and emoluments. So they're exempt from tax. So the question is, why are more senior employees exempt, hourly paid workers or not? You said it has to do with something to do with filing a tax return? Just explain that for me, please. Because if they're exempt, I don't need, why they'd be filing unless they had other sources of income. But the real question was, why would better paid employees not pay any tax, and the hourly paid workers would have to bear tax? That was the question.
Madam Speaker, again,
Minister, you may sit. No, you may. So housekeeping, you may sit in committee. It's usually less formal, which is why persons are referred to by their name, as was asked earlier, and you may sit to respond. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the debate we had in the very first session could have also come to committee stage with those discussions. So, Minister, please respond.
Thank you. So the Articles of Agreement, Madam Speaker, with specific reference to Section 9, addresses immunities from taxation, which precludes the bank from collecting taxes on behalf of TAG. This is similar to embassies, consulates, and other international organizations. And thus, the bank does not have any obligation to collect and remit PAYE, tax contributions, and contributions on behalf of its employees. So, again, to repeat, the employees of the bank are deemed to be self-employed for the purposes of administering the Income Tax Act and are required to file individual income tax returns.
Madam Chairman, the wording of the provision before us says that no tax shall be levied on their salaries or emoluments paid by the bank. That would exempt that from tax. Not to say that the bank is precluded from having to withhold like a PAYE person. That's a different matter. If the intention is that they should file their own returns and are liable to tax on their salaries like all other Jamaicans, this is not achieving that. This is doing the reverse. This is making their pay tax-free, which is apparently not the intention. I think we should, personally, I think we should suspend the debate on this and take advice. It's a serious matter.
Did we read the memo? Did we read the memorandum? Ready? Minister, your mic is now
yes.
on.
It's providing for just what it says.
Yes, we were.
Madam Speaker,
Members, we were on.
Madam Speaker, just for further clarification, employees of the bank or workers of the bank would be exempt from taxation, and it would not only apply to executive directors, alternates, officials, or employees of the bank or citizens of Jamaica. But it is in recognition that if you are employed to the bank worldwide in one of these categories, that you are exempt from paying taxes, and that was not clear in our laws in Jamaica. So this amendment to this amendment today is to ensure that all employees, including Jamaican nationals, are on the same level playing field with others who are employed to the bank in other countries.
Thank you, Minister. I do believe, I think I understand it. Minister, this is the original bill. I still think we can take a look just for edification. Principal Act. Minister, would you like to conclude? Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs would like to.
Madam Speaker, just for further information. So the act that you pull up, which is the one being amended, the Breton Woods Agreement Act, it is the act which provides for Jamaica's relationship with the bank. And Section 5 in particular sets out the immunities and privileges of the bank in Jamaica and the appropriate provision which deals with the immunities and privileges, such as income tax and exemption. So the amendment is really just to bring the immunities and the exemption to persons employed to the bank in Jamaica, as the minister said. Yes, for Jamaican citizens. No, it's a recognition of the immunities and privileges that are accorded.
All right, thank you. Members, I put clause 1 and clause 2, and I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. I do now report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendments. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. We're back in the House. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendments. Minister?
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Clerk?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Breton Woods Agreements Act to exempt locally recruited employees of the World Bank from the payment of income tax, read a third time and pass.
House Leader?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is not contemplated for us to do any further business today. I therefore ask that the House adjourns for a date to be fixed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Please remember March 6th and March 7th. Very important, everyone. Standing Finance, the meeting of the entire House. You'll be here. The question is that the House do now adjourn for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned.